Pandemonium. It's become pandemonium and I don't trust anything or anyone anymore. One day, one night, and the entire world I knew was turned on its head. Nothing makes sense anymore. I have to admit, I am drowning in it all, and I am a colonel. I dread to think what this is all doing to the men, but I can see it in their eyes, the way they move, the frantic looks they all give me. Holy Throne. I never thought I would say this, but I wish I had a regiment or two of Krieg here now. I never enjoyed fighting alongside those fanatics. Not a brain cell between them. Just zeal and an insane wish to sacrifice themselves at any damned opportunity. But the Emperor only knows how I could use that kind of steel now. On my own world. Or at least the world I thought was my own. But it isn't my world anymore. It's theirs. We are holding on by our fingertips, but that is it. We can't make any headway. Every time I think, surely, they can't want more. There can't be any more of them. And they arrive on the skyline. People I knew, from places I loved. Hordes of them. We have been protecting the spaceport since it began. Protected as it is with a mountain at our backs, it is the perfect defensive location. Or so I thought. So its designers and builders thought. Now it is a death trap and I feel like a rat in a cage. I, an officer of the Emperor's own Astra Militarum, with over 4 decades of experience fighting across some of the most desolate hellscapes, across the most barbarous death worlds. I am out of ideas. On the very first night they seemed to arrive from nowhere, be connected to everyone. No institute, organization or unit was safe from their infiltration. I can only imagine that my unit was still pure due to having only just returned in the last week from our campaigns. We're awaiting reinforcements before being sent out to another war, another opportunity to serve the Imperium. We thought we would have a few months of R&R, well earned, I will state right now. That last engagement saw 40% casualties in my battle group, but we did it. We smashed the insurgents. But it was only days before this all started. Mere days. So, for a week or more we have been met with the same thing each morning, most nights. Hordes of them unending. Despite our clear superiority in reaping them like wheat in a thresher. They keep coming. Barely armed, barely able to fight. Construction workers and civilians. They just charge our lines. No matter how many of them are cut down by our ordered fire. No matter the mounds of bodies that now litter the landscape before our walls. Still they come. I have seen orcs break before this level of slaughter. Seen Xenos who knew we would hunt them down and exterminate their entire races, fight with less fervour, less desperation, less sheer ignorance at how little they are actually doing to our positions. Still they come. But my men are on the verge of imploding. I know this. We have all the ammunition we could ever wish for, as our resupply was at the port, ready for us to take to the next campaign. Why don't we simply get into a ship and leave, you may ask? Why not? Well, it's very simple. 1, this is my home. 2, they, whatever they are, have control of the defense grid. The instant we take to high altitude, they will blow us out of the skies. I know this, as it is exactly what happened only 3 days ago. A fast ship, one piloted by one of my best, went up, but soon came down in a ball of flames. Musing over. I look at the auspex and see that they are coming again. Men, women, children. All our previous families, friends, neighbours. Eyes glazed and faces twisted in rage. They simply charge our lines. I give the order and the firing begins again. Some of my troops are taking aim and then closing their eyes when they fire. They do not wish to see the moment their actions cut families apart. None of it makes any sense. Once, just once, I thought I saw something in our scopes. Just that once. A thing. It moved too fast for a human. It had multiple arms. And even at the range we are at, looking at it made me feel someone was tap dancing on my grave, like a shadow death to come. But death not only of me, but all humanity. I'd seen it fleetingly, but it was unmistakably Xenos. The things behind this travesty. They want access to the port. I know it. From here they can then expand across the stars, but they will have to get through us to do it. What the hell was that? What the hell is happening? It feels like rain, hail. Something is hitting the platform, something from above. My screen dies as something hits the Auspex arrays. I am blind. I cannot contact my troops, cannot direct them. My entire staff are now agog and on the verge of panic. I must control the situation through action, give them something to concentrate on. I walk to the hatch and take my pistol out. My guards nervously array themselves behind me. The entire staff look on. I twist the hatch as the hail seems to speed up. I push the hatch open just enough to see, but close it again instantly. The sight would break my men. I know this because I have to control every instinct in me to stay calm. The training of the Scholar Progenium kicks in, but that is it. I control myself. But all of my training does not yield me any answer. What did I see? What is the hail? My eyes did not focus immediately, going from the dusk of the comms room to the dazzling glare of the outside. But when it did, I saw it. Red. Everything was red. The hail, the thumps. They are not boulders. They are not weapons. They are people. It is raining. People. They have climbed the mountain behind us and are throwing themselves off. They are leaping to their deaths, just so they can attempt to land on our gun emplacements, our communications arrays, our lines. They are now burying our lines. I cannot now destroy the port from here with my headquarters cut off. We have only one option left. I salute my fine men and women, the brothers and sisters I have been told to lead, and I do so one more time. I show them the way. My pistol enters my mouth and I angle it up, so as to make it instant. I am Baldermort, and I wish to introduce you to the factions and forces of the Warhammer 40k universe. Today, we shall discover one of the oldest, yet newest, of the Warhammer factions, the Genestealer cults. For the Genestealer cults were an army that could be played in the early days of Warhammer, in that strange era known as the 20th century. But then they were discontinued. I shall not say that dreaded word, beginning with S, that I dub the vileness. Ooh. But only recently, they have been returned to the Warhammer setting with a glorious new raft of figures and a deep and rich lore. Today, we will only be exploring the very briefest snippet to whet the palate, but know that in the future we shall explore this wonderful faction in more detail. I suppose the most pertinent question is, if they are a cult, what is a Genestealer? Well, I will be throwing up a few images and will continue to do so through this entry. But for the purposes of explanation, think of an alien from the films, and then add on 2 more arms and the ability to cut through any metal. And it has even more claws and teeth. In my mind, a Genestealer would make ribbons of the movie Alien in short order, but I'm sure there would be many a rebuttal in the comments section concentrating on their acidic blood. I'm sure the discussions will be fun. Now, I wish to lean on existing wisdom to do the heavy lifting in this entry, as it is so new. I see no need to reinvent the wheel in this regard. To quote, "Worshippers of the Xenos. From the dark depths and shadowy streets emerged the Genestealer cultists, malformed figures united by a sinister worship of inscrutable starborn entities. Secretive, stealthy, and utterly malignant, they are the cankers growing unseen in the hidden spaces of the Imperium. Humanity is beset on all fronts by Xenos raiders and the nightmarish forces of chaos. Billions of lives are sacrificed upon the altar of war every day to keep the enemy at bay. Yet the most insidious threats to mankind's survival may already have seeped into the bloodstream of the Imperium. Embedded into the infrastructure of countless seemingly loyal worlds, the Genestealer cults bide their time, spreading tendrils of corruption through the native population until they are ready to begin their bloody insurrections. Once unleashed, they rise up in a surging tide, armed with stolen Imperial weaponry and crude industrial tools turned to horrific purposes. When the Imperium first encountered Genestealers upon the moons of Mgal, they thought them to be a unique species. In fact, as the Ordo Xenos discovered after a harrowing series of investigations, they are the vanguard organisms that the Tyranid Hive Fleet seed before them to create disunity and fear in their path. Resilient and possessed of razor-sharp claws that can carve through warplate, Genestealers are used in open battle by the Hive Fleet as shock troops. When infiltrating Imperial space, however, the Genestealers instead show their capacity for stealth and cunning, slinking and creeping, stalking and murdering in silence. Solitary Genestealers stow away on spacecraft and spread along space lanes like a virus. In theory, it only takes one Genestealer successfully slipping aboard a cargo freighter and reaching a populated world to spell the doom of an entire sector. There are legends in the Imperium of titanic space hulks, infested with tens of thousands of these creatures. Such a nest could bring utter catastrophe to swathes of the Imperium. Should a Genestealer reach a suitable world, its dark work begins in earnest. In the space of a few years, hundreds of civilians will have been abducted by the creature and infected with Tyranid genetic structures. In time, the infected give birth to vile hybrids of Xenos and human. Those descended from the first victims are unmistakably alien, with large domed heads and razor-sharp talons. As the corruption continues to spread, subsequent generations are born who can pass as human, and are able to blend in with the wider population, and even Imperial organizations such as the Adeptus Arbites, the Munitorum, and the Astra Militarum. As the cult's numbers grow, more specialized hybrids are created to serve the Genestealer, now worshipped as a patriarch. Maguses are psychically gifted individuals tainted by the Patriarch's will, tasked with converting key targets within the planet's government and military leadership. The hybrid masses are organized and led by primuses, generals and ambush specialists responsible for coordinating the eventual uprising. Nexoses provide tactical support to their primuses' strategic plans, the command of detail and contingency second to none. Sanctuses act as assassins and locuses as bodyguards, even as clamoverses preach the word of the cult and foil enemy communications. Atalan jackals speed into battle upon dirt cycles and wolf squads, harry the enemy flanks, while pure-strain Genestealers and aberrant monstrosities, sometimes bolstered by the gene alchemists known as biophaguses, act as shock troops. Whether it takes a handful of months or many years, eventually the cult will go on the warpath. Only then will the Patriarch send the synaptic order to rise up and drown the planet in blood. When the creature's minions receive the psychic command to begin the insurrection, the hybrids arm themselves with purloined military gear and mining tools, and surge forth from their hidden lairs in mass tides. Guided by the cunning will of their war leaders, they strike first at key tactical locations like communication outposts, spaceports, and munition yards. Stripped of its defenses and ability to call for help, the planet is left ripe for conquest. In a frenzy of brutal violence, the cultist uprisings fall upon those enemies who pose the greatest threat to the cult's agenda. Bones are shattered by ear-bursting blasts from seismic cannons. Weaponized rock drills are thrust into vulnerable flesh in a horrifying eruption of gore, and mining charges are used as makeshift grenades. The banners and sigils of the cult are unveiled at last, standards and worm-formed totems held high by acolyte icon wards, whose presence inspires the broodkin to new heights of savage fervour. During the many long years of preparation for this moment, the cult will have stolen and sequestered many vehicles to aid it in its murderous campaign. Rugged Goliath trucks and rock grinders, a common sight to mines and manufactorums all across the Imperium, are turned to violent purpose. Mounted with a range of heavy armaments, Goliath trucks rush broods of acolytes to the front lines, carving a path across even the most rugged of terrain and releasing an unceasing hail of bullets to tear through enemy infantry. Rock grinders simply crash into the center of the foe's formations, reaping a hideous toll as their saw-toothed drill dozer blades grind screaming bodies into bloody paste. Should the threat of enemy armor emerge, the cult will respond by deploying stolen Lehman Russ tanks and Sentinel walkers piloted by neophyte hybrids who laid hidden in the ranks of human armies for decades. Utterly loyal to the Patriarch, they turn their guns on their former comrades without a second thought. The psychological impact of this sudden betrayal is a weapon unto itself. All too often, the stimulus for this uprising is the approach of a Tyranid biofleet, those the cult see as saviors from above. As the High Fleet vomits its swarms of warrior organisms into the stricken world's atmosphere, the cultists sing rapturous prayers to their deliverers. Even as the Tyranids exterminate and devour every source of biomass on the planet, still the cultists hold faith in their corrupted hearts that these voracious aliens will elevate the faithful, helping them to transcend their mortal weaknesses. Eagerly they await the blessed oneness of form and purpose they have been promised. For a while at least, the Tyranids and the Patriarch's brood fight as one, the hive mind's control ensuring that the cult is not preyed upon. Maguses hurl illusions that warp and tear at the minds of the enemy, turning them upon each other with sadistic pleasure. The Patriarch's generals marshal their forces with consummate skill, spending their warriors' lives by the thousands to open a path for the Tyranid assault. In this final, exalted hour, the Patriarch himself enters the fray, and his faithful are sent into a zealous frenzy as their prophet rips the unworthy apart with razored claws and shredding fangs. As soon as the last of the defenders is overrun by this tide of chitin and scything talons and claws, the hive mind subsumes the Patriarch into its greater consciousness. It becomes merely another organism in the Tyranid swarm, the psychic brood mind that once united its cult severed in an instant. In an awful moment of realization, the cultists at last understand the fell truth. Those same creatures from beyond the stars that they once worshipped as gods are revealed as their doom incarnate. For to the Tyranids, all flesh is much the same. Pure-strain Genestealers propagate with a hideous alien fecundity, infecting generations of Imperial prey until the time is right to strike. Each new batch of offspring seems more human than the last as the Xenos germ seed is seemingly diluted. But within, the shape of the beast lurks unchanged. At the culmination of the curse's cycle, alien nightmares are born anew. As with all their void-born kind, the Genestealer is inhumanly patient, able to subsist on very little sustenance and to wait for decades if necessary before making its move. When a Genestealer reaches a world ripe for infection, it will immediately go into hiding, clambering into dark and forgotten spaces, and lurking unseen as it prepares to spread its influence. Once it is certain of being able to acquire victims while still remaining undetected, it will stalk the fringes of society in search of prey, emerging only on the blackest of nights to snatch away the unwary with its steel-hard muscular limbs. Those who fall prey to the Genestealer's silent ambushes are not torn apart for later consumption, as with most victims of the Tyranid race. Instead, they are put in thrall by its hypnotic gaze. Selected victims are then impregnated with a portion of the creature's own genetic pattern, delivered under the skin via a ribbed tube called an ovipositor. This process is known in the cult as the Genestealer's kiss. though it bestows a portion of the Xenos entity's strength and longevity. This implantation is as cold and uncaring as a blade in the back. The resultant parasitism alters the body until the Xenos taint runs throughout. It also alters the mind, forcing the victim to revere the Genestealer as a messianic figure, the idol of an obsessive new religion. Whenever a Genestealer implants a victim, it condemns their bloodline forever. Their hybrid offspring are grotesque and misshapen, creatures who are as varied in form as they are hideous to behold. Certain features are common, such as a bulbous craniums and snarling, needle-toothed maws, a pair of extra limbs ending in viciously sharp claws, truncated tail spikes, and mottled purplish skin. These initial hybrids are known as the first generation. The Genestealer and its hybrids of the first generation will then hypnotize new victims, who join the cult and later sire young in their turn. This gives rise to the second generation. These new creatures are hunched and stooped, not in the manner of the old or infirm, but more like pressured springs that are ready to explode into sudden movement. These hybrids may have 5 or even 6 limbs, but their eyes and mouths are like those of their human parent, and they can make themselves understood in low Gothic. Though their minds are still so alien that they defy analysis, the second generation is sapient, even enough to understand its host society. Some are even put to work in the industrial subcultures of their kin, their uncanny strength and resilience allowing them to use heavy mining tools and explosives with far more ease than a human operative. As each cycle passes, a new breeding stock is brought into the fold. The hybrid offspring evince fewer mutations. The third generation is typified by an upright stance. Though they appear human from a distance, on closer inspection they have heavily ridged heads, mauve to violet skin, and may hide a vestigial limb under their clothes. By the fourth generation, the scions of the cult can pass for human, inveigling themselves into positions of power to further their agenda. Leaders of uncanny influence emerge within the hierarchy, psychic agents and charismatic demagogues whose rhetoric inflames the subculture further. Fourth-generation cultists can breed true. They do not give birth to untainted humans, but instead to pure-stream Genestealers, just as alien as the original progenitor. The parents of these fifth-generation creatures see them not as the hideous, hissing changelings they truly are, but as soft-skinned infants, innocent and sweet. They do everything they can to protect them, even giving their own lives if necessary. By this point, the curse's hold is complete, and the brood cycle begins anew. The Genestealer at the heart of the cult, known as the Patriarch, has an inherent control over every one of these minions, no matter the generation. The Patriarch unites them with a subtle alteration to the psyche, a subconscious link known as the brood mind. It is this shared sentience that makes the cult so tight-knit and loyal, that gives them uncanny strength and speed in battle, and that seeks to undermine the spiritual sanctity of mankind. Such cults can thrive in the dark corners of the Imperium longer than any suspect. On those occasions when they rise up in open rebellion, they can capsize our planet's defenses in hours. The cultists of these grand insurgencies have spent their whole lives preparing for the day of the final conquest. Generation after generation have been bred in secrecy, cycle after cycle, bearing nauseating fruit. The infected have spread the curse to others and to their children, who in turn have infected more. Like a living virus, they breed exponentially, their numbers swelling until the numbers of the underworld are strong enough to seize the entire host planet. Though the later generations of each cycle have the appearance of common men, inside they are Xenos through and through. Their allegiance is owed only to the organism that brought the Genestealer curse to their world, and the hybrids of their hidden kindred. Their Patriarch, star-born and inhuman, squats at the center of a web of influence that expands until it covers the entire world. Every soul in the cult is obedient to this repulsive creature, and would give their lives to save him. Once the cult is fully mature, it seeks to propagate once more. Its leaders carefully send selected pure strains on long journeys to locate new feeding grounds, there to begin the whole hellish process over again. End quote. End quote. So we see the horror that is the Genestealer cult. for it only takes one, yes, one, Genestealer to land on a planet for it to be potentially lost, though it may take generations. Also, the re-emergence of the Genestealer cult army, along with a full Harlequin's Codex, shows a clear return from Games Workshop to a sublime state, actually acting like a company, and not an institution. Why do I say this? Well, there was a period when Games Workshop acted like an institution, answerable to none, mindful of none, cutting off from their community and basically bunkering. If you do not like it, do not play. A dark period indeed. But what does a company do? It makes its customers happy and wish to return to purchase their product again and again. The comparatively recent change in course has led them to gain in strength more than they may have dreamed. Now their websites and interaction are excellent. No, we will never always get what we want, but often now we do. The return of the Genestealer cult army is a very clear indicant that Games Workshop are now listening to their customers, their fans, as they always should have done if they wish to be the center of our worlds, instead of them being the center of ours. A move I heartily applaud. For in any game of conflict and contest, the most important element, outside of fun of course, is variety. The increased amount of armies and wonderful new diversity in how they can be played may make a competitive player wince at the sheer volume of formations they may face, but to the majority of players, this is the absolute wellspring of fun. Battles will no longer be predictable set pieces, and the dazzling variety make every battle a guessing game, and, in my humble opinion, all the better for it. Because Warhammer is not chess. It is never ever going to be fair or even or balanced. Nor should it be. For no battle that has ever been fought in the history of conflict has ever been fair. So I say rejoice for the abundance of armies, figures, rules and potential outcomes, because this is a wonderful pastime and a magnificent hobby. Let us all just have fun with it, and let the tournament organisers put on reasonable restrictions that permit that format to shine. But let us narrative players have our diversity. There really is a way for all camps, for all groups, to be happy. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. If you have enjoyed my brief introduction to the Genestealer cult, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you are a regular, gentle listener, then please do also consider supporting us on Patreon. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.